Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. We have a great show for you today. Dr. Mark Hitchcock and I are talking about the rapture of the church and talking about the arguments against a pre-trib rapture and what the Bible actually says. And we're going to be proving to you in this show today that the rapture is pre-tribulation. It's going to be very encouraging, but maybe you have people that, argue with you about that. Maybe some of you have questions. We're going to be answering those on the show today. And let me just mention real quickly before I get into the interview with Dr. Mark Hitchcock that we have our conference coming up September 20th and 21st. Dr. David Jeremiah, Max Lucado. We have Ed Young, Pastor Ed Young, who's the pastor of Fellowship Church. That's where we're having the conference this year. We have, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, myself, Billy Crone, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn. We have a fantastic conference. It's going to be Friday night and all day Saturday. So we're adding the Friday night. The price remains the same. Bring somebody with you. Bring a group from your church. Bring neighbors or friends. It's going to be great. But I'm mentioning this today because we have a lot of people signing up. We have reserved seating, so you can go there and reserve your seat. But the seats are filling up. So go on, get your tickets right now. It's going to be a fantastic time. Also want to mention, as I introduce Dr. Mark Hitchcock, we have our new book out. And this is called AI and the Antichrist. It's in our series called What's Next? Our next book, by the way, is on the rapture of the church. And so this is AI and the Antichrist. This is a really great book to help you understand one of the main figures in the Bible, the Antichrist. 33 titles in the Old Testament, 13 in the New Testament talked about. I believe he's just about to show up. So AI and the Antichrist by myself. Dr. Mark Hitchcock is joining me now, and I just want to say he's the senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. And he is a scholar, written over 30 books on the end times, and he's a regular contributor here at endtimes.com. Mark, it's great to have you with me today.
Well, it's always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is a show that I've wanted to do for a long time because you and I both, we have people, pastor friends or theologians or whoever, who don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. And some very strongly believe in a post-tribulation rapture, a rapture at the end, or maybe a pre-wrath rapture, or whatever you want to call it. So you and I both very strongly believe in a pre-trib rapture. The rapture, there's going to be the rapture of the church. We're going to talk about that first. But I want to have you as a theologian, because you are a theologian. You've written over 30 books on the end times. And of course, you're a PhD from Dallas Theological Seminary. Yeah. And so you've got and you studied under John Walvoord, under Dwight Pentecost, some of the most famous end-time theologians. And so I just want to have this show as a reference point to people. People right now, they may have questions about pre-trib rapture, but also they may have a lot of friends or family, bothering them and telling them things that are troubling and things like that. So the rapture, the concept of the rapture, where do we find that in the Scripture?
Well, we find it in several places in the New Testament. And really, an important point to make is I think the rapture is only in the New Testament. It's not in the Old Testament. Now, there's pictures of it with Elijah being caught up and Enoch being caught up. But the rapture's in the New Testament is called a mystery. In other words, it's something that was never revealed before and that man could never figure out on his own. 1 Corinthians 15 calls it a mystery. But the rapture it's that future event when the Lord Jesus is going to come from heaven. There's going to be a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trumpet of God. And those who've died, believers who've died during this church age, they're going to be resurrected. They're going to get a new body, and the Lord will bring their perfected spirit with him. They'll get a new body. But then he says, those who are alive and remain in 1 Thessalonians 4 will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And that word caught up there is the Greek word harpazo. It's used 13 times in the New Testament. It means to snatch or to seize. It's used, all kinds of different references. But that word, we get the word rapture because a man years ago named Jerome, when he translated the Bible from Greek, the Greek word harpazo, into Latin, he used the word rapio. So we get our word rapture from that. So, people often say, well, the word rapture is not in the Bible. Well, most translations don't have that word. It's a Greek word harpazo. It was rapio in Latin. We call it the rapture, but you can call it the catching away of the saints. But it's that time when the Lord's going to come, and all those who are alive on the earth who know him are going to be caught up to go meet him in the air. We're going to disappear from the earth. There's going to be a global vanishing.
So that's 1 Thessalonians 4, which really is the main text that we have. Is there another text? In other words, is there somewhere else? You mentioned 1 Corinthians 15. Where else do we see the rapture in the New Testament?
Well, I see it in John 14, 1-3. Jesus said to his disciples, don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. For we're not so, I would have told you, I go and prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. So it's revealed there by Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15 says that we're going to be we're going to be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, when the trumpet sounds. So really, John 14, 1-3, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 50 and following, and 1 Thessalonians 4, 13-18. Those would be the three main ones, kind of the three classic texts. There's many others that mention, the Lord's coming is mentioned over 300 times in the 260 chapters in the New Testament. So it's a frequently mentioned topic, but those are kind of the places where it's mainly clustered together.
One in every 30 verses in the New Testament refers to the return of Jesus, okay, either to the rapture or the second coming. So it's a very common thing. So there's a couple of chapters. You mentioned John 14. So Jesus said, I'm going away to prepare a place for you, and I'm coming back to receive you into myself. So in Luke 17, and Jesus is talking here about the rapture. He's talking about his days. His return will be like the days of Noah. And I want to talk about that as a text of proving the pre-trib rapture. But he says, I'm going to come. And then he talks about he's going to come like the days of Noah. And he says, two people be in one bed, one taken, one left. So in John 14, where Jesus says, I'm going away and I'm going to come back and receive you to myself, the word there is paralambano. And so receive is paralambano in the Greek. When Jesus in Luke 17 says, two people in one bed, one taken, one left, two women grinding at the mill, one taken, one left, the word taken there is the word paralambano. It means to receive into yourself. Yes. So when he's describing the rapture there, he's saying, I'm going to come. John 14, he says, I'm going to come back. Luke 17 and Matthew 24 speak specifically about how that's going to happen, like the days of Noah and Lot. And so let's talk about, I'm going to go to Matthew 24, because this is where a lot of people get confused. And I want to get your input on this. So there's two texts from Matthew 24, one talking about a post-trib gathering of saints, the other talking about a pre-trib rapture. So this is Matthew 24, beginning in verse 27. As the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the heaven, the powers of the heavens will be shaken, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So that text causes a lot of confusion, because it's very clearly talking about the end of the tribulation, immediately after the tribulation of those days. He's also talking about a gathering of the saints from the four corners of the world. Okay. Here's another text from Matthew 24 that is a completely different reference related to a rapture. Matthew 24, 30, beginning in verse 36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven. He's again talking about his coming, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will be the days of the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood. Now, in the other text, he says immediately after the tribulation of those days. Here, he's talking about his coming as it was in the days of Noah before the flood. They were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah, he's talking about a specific day in history that Noah got on the ark before there was a flood. He says, until the day that Noah entered the ark and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two men will be in the field. One will be taken, paralambano, the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know the hour your Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So talk about those two texts there and what you believe related to one being obviously the second coming and the other one being a rapture.
Well, yeah, there's two different viewpoints on this. One is that you've mentioned that this is talking about the return, and then this is talking about the rapture. Others would say this whole passage is about the return because they'll say, whenever the flood came, it says the flood came and took them all away. That what it's saying there, the flood took them away to judgment. That these people were taken away to judgment and destroyed, and that's the way it'll be at the return of Christ. These people are going to be taken away, and those who are left behind are left then to go into the millennium. So you can see it two different views here. The people being taken away are taken away into judgment, like the people were at the flood, and the people who are left behind will be left behind to go into the millennium. Whereas at the rapture, it's going to be the opposite of that. The unrighteous are going to be left behind. The righteous are going to be taken. So even if this is a reference here to the return of Christ when he comes back at his second coming, it's still a picture here of what will happen at the rapture.
Right.
Because at the rapture of the church, the righteous are going to be taken and the unrighteous are going to be left. So it just depends on whether you see in Matthew 24 a continuation of him talking about the return, or you see him shifting then from talking about the return then to talking about the rapture. In either case, it's clear that at the rapture, when the rapture comes, the unrighteous are going to be left behind,
right,
and the righteous are going to be taken to heaven to be with Christ.
So, and now I have heard people say, pastors say, that when the rapture happens, the unrighteous are taken, the righteous are left behind. But 1 Thessalonians 4 says we're going to meet the Lord in the clouds in the air. Okay, so it's not here on earth. The rapture.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to be taken to go meet him in the air. Yeah, that's right. We're going to be caught up to meet the Lord in the air. But those who see this passage here in Matthew 24 as a continuation about the rapture or the second coming or the return, what they would say is what this is talking about here is that you've got two people. One's taken away to judgment, and the other one is left on the earth, to enter into the millennium. So it just depends on whether you see this is talking about the rapture, the two in the field, one taken, one left, or it's a continuation of the speaking about the return of Christ. And people hold both views, and people that are pre-trib hold both views.
Yeah,
of that, because that doesn't violate the pre-trib rapture at all.
Yeah,
to hold that other view.
Well, my argument, Mark, and I want you to see if you agree with this. See, when Jesus in Matthew 24, he says, "For as in the days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage." In Luke 17, and this is a parallel verse or parallel passage, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, and they were given in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all." So at the end of the tribulation, people say there's going to be a post-trib rapture. At the end of the tribulation, there's not going to be buying, selling, marrying, giving in marriage, and planning and building. Is there, after all the judgments that have hit the earth? Business as usual?
Yeah, no, that's the difficulty of seeing it that way and talking about not knowing the day or the hour, because people during the tribulation period will pretty much know the time of the return.
Absolutely.
They're going to know, now they may not know exactly the day or the hour it's going to take place, but they'll know pretty close to when it's happening. So that's the difficulty of taking this related to the second coming, is the surprise of it, the business as usual aspect of it. That's what favors, I think, seeing this here, as a reference to being the rapture. And, they don't know the time. And like you say, people are just kind of going on doing what they're doing. It doesn't seem like by the time you get to the end of the tribulation period that it could be that way.
Yeah, well, planting, building, marrying, giving in marriage, it all speaks of hope for the future. Why are you getting married? For the future. We want to spend our lives together. Why are you planting a crop? Hope for the future. My argument is, at the end of the tribulation, the earth, after the bowl judgments and everything, the earth is just a smoldering ruin. The kingdom of the Antichrist has been cursed. And so the business as usual aspect, that's where we are right now, in my opinion. You have, in the days of Noah and Lot, you had violence and immorality rampant in the world. And that's what we see today. And you had this business as usual attitude of people, of sinners. Noah's building an ark and they're mocking him, and it looks like he's crazy, but you have a righteous remnant living for God, and the world basically has turned against God. So let's talk about some arguments here. So you said 1 Thessalonians 4 was the first passage you were quoting. At the end of that, it says, the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are alive and remain will be caught up, harpazo, together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words. Okay, so I want you to comfort me by telling me I'm going through the tribulation.
Well, that's hard to do. And that's the whole point. Paul's writing First Thessalonians because after he left there, some believers had died. And he told them all about the rapture. And he starts the whole passage in verse 13, says, I don't want you to be ignorant, about these things. I don't want you to grieve as those who have no hope. You want them to know, hey, your loved ones aren't going to miss the rapture. They're going to be resurrected someday. We're going to be caught up to meet them in the air. So, it's called in Titus 2:13, the blessed hope. Tim LaHaye used to say, if we have to go through the whole tribulation period, it's not the blessed hope, it's the blasted hope. And I think that's a good way to put that. But yeah, it's presented as a blessing. It's presented as grace. Lord's going to come and receive us to himself. It's presented as something that's to comfort us and to be a blessing to us. And if you have to go through half the tribulation or 3/4 of it or all of it, depending on those other views of the timing, it's not a comforting, blessed hope.
If you've read the book of Revelation, I don't know how you could ever be comforted by knowing that you're going to go through the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, the bowl, any part of it. Now, there are also others, and I have a friend of mine specifically who believes this, and he says, well, we're going to go through the tribulation. He believes in post-trib, and he says, we're going to be spared from the wrath of the Lamb, because, 1 Thessalonians 5 says God is not destined us to wrath. 1 Thessalonians 1 says Jesus delivers us from the wrath to come. He says we are spared. God is going to supernaturally spare us in the tribulation from the wrath of the Lamb, but not the wrath of the Antichrist, the wrath of the beast. What do you say about that?
Well, the problem with that is if you read the book of Revelation, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, these are global. In the fourth seal, a fourth of the earth dies. In the sixth trumpet, a third of the earth dies. How is God going to be able to shield that many people on the earth from this wrath that's coming? It's global in its scope. And so this idea that post-tribulationists, in fact, all the views of the timing of the rapture all agree that we're exempt from wrath. So the mid-tribbers just say, well, the wrath doesn't start till the midpoint, so that's when we're caught up. Pre-wrath, that view holds it. It's about 3/4 of the way through is when the day of the Lord or the wrath starts. Post-tribbers usually say the wrath is kind of concentrated at the end, and we're kept through that period of time, through that wrath. But when you get to the end of the tribulation with the bowl judgments, with the wrath of God, it's being poured out on the entire world. There's no way that you could see believers being exempt from that with the global scope of what's happening.
Well, and I said this scripture is talking about the Antichrist here. They worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, who is like the beast. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. And so he was given authority to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So I said this to my friend, and I said, we are not exempt. I said, and he said, we are exempt from the wrath of God. We're not exempt from the wrath of the Antichrist. And he said, Christians have never been exempt from persecution. And so, and what I said to him, that's not persecution. That is the devil. That's Satan having license all over the earth to kill saints. And of course, both Revelation 7 and Revelation 20 show us pictures of mass martyrdom that occurs during the tribulation. So you don't believe that believers during the tribulation will be exempted from the wrath of the Lamb or the wrath of the Antichrist?
Yeah, it seems like believers during the tribulation period, there's that wrath being poured out. The exemption from wrath is promised to the bride of Christ. It's promised to the church. There'll be believers, people after the rapture who come to Christ, and they're going to be on earth during that time of wrath that's on the earth, because Jesus is opening the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments are being poured out, the bowl judgments are coming. So there's going to be wrath on the earth that believers then will experience. They're going to experience the wrath of God, the wrath of the Antichrist, and the wrath of Satan. It's going to all be there for them. But in the New Testament, in 1 Thessalonians 1:10, 5:9, as you mentioned, Revelation 3:10, these passages mention that we are going to be kept from that hour of testing that's coming on the whole world. So that's a promise to the bride of Jesus Christ. And in Revelation 3:10, it not only says we're going to be kept from the hour of the testing that's coming on the whole world. So we're not only going to be kept from the testing, but it says from the very time of the testing. So we're going to be kept from that time period, which is the coming time of the tribulation.
Well, Jesus said, this is in Luke chapter 21. Luke 21 is a end times passage about the return of Jesus. Take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the cares of this life, and that day come on you unexpectedly, because it's talking about the rapture. It will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Okay, that's the rapture. That's an inclusive statement. All those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. A snare, that's an animal trap, immediately. Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things and to stand before the Son of Man. So Jesus is telling us to pray that we be worthy to escape, not to endure. To me, if we're going to go through the tribulation, he's going to say, be counted worthy to endure all this, but he's saying be counted worthy to escape. And some people would say to me, Jimmy, you're an escapist. You bet I am. I'm an obedient escapist because Jesus told me to pray that way. And so I believe we're going to escape. So here's another objection that I heard recently, and that is the rapture is never mentioned in the book of Revelation. And so if there's going to be a rapture, why is it mentioned in the book of Revelation? You have an answer for that one?
Well, there's a few things. One is, and I mentioned just a minute ago, Revelation 3:10. Jesus says to the church at Philadelphia, which those messages to the 7 churches were to all the churches. It says, because you've kept my perseverance, I will keep you from the hour of testing, that hour that's coming upon the whole earth to test those who dwell on the earth. So it's a time of testing for these earth dwellers. And he says, I'm going to keep you from the time of that testing. Well, the only way to be kept from that whole time of testing is not to be there. So I think it's mentioned there. The rapture is clearly. Another thing that's interesting in the book of Revelation, the word ecclesia, the word church, is used 20 times in the book of Revelation. It's used 19 times in the first 3 chapters. And you don't have it again until chapter 22, verse 16. So there's no mention of the church on earth from Revelation 6 to Revelation 18, 19. There's no reference to it. So it's strangely absent. There's another important point is, and this is an interesting point for those who say, well, the second coming and the rapture and all that's just the same event. They're post-tribulationists. They would say that the rapture happens right at the second coming. But the difficulty with that is when you get to Revelation 19, when it mentions Jesus coming on a white horse to the earth, there's no rapture mentioned. I mean, they're totally absent. So post-tribulationists don't have any proof of a rapture in the book of Revelation either at the second coming.
Yeah.
In fact, what you see is where's the bride? If you read Revelation 19, verses 1 to 6, the bride is in heaven, being married to the bridegroom and being readied, being clothed in fine linen. And then when you get to chapter 19, verse 11, the bride returns with Jesus to the earth. So if we're going to be in heaven, being married to Christ and being rewarded and then returning with him at his second coming, it only makes sense. We have to have gone up to heaven sometime before that. That we're not going to get caught up to heaven in a split second of time and all that happens. So to me, those are points that it doesn't just say the rapture is going to be before this event, but those are strong, evidence that the church has to be in heaven before the second coming of Christ back to the earth takes place. We're coming back with him. So we have to go up sometime before him.
Listen, I hope that you enjoyed this show. And if you're a subscriber here on the YouTube channel, I appreciate it if you're not, hit subscribe right now, and you'll know when everything comes out from us and get everything that we have. If you're not a subscriber to endtimes.com, a paid subscriber, go to endtimes.com. You get the full Tipping Point show every week without commercials, as well as Dr. Mark Hitchcock's podcast that comes out every Thursday. We have an Israel update that comes out every Tuesday from Brian Schrager. Articles, information, answering questions, all week long, we have information to encourage you and to enlighten you, to equip you to know what's going on in this crazy world that we're living in. This is the world of the end times the Bible talks about, and we want to help you to navigate that and to stay encouraged and focused, and to be able to help your friends and family, to be able to be informed of things when they're happening, things related to Israel, things related to end times. And so go to endtimes.com, $7 a month. Become a subscriber there. We have our conference coming up September 20th and 21st at Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas. We'd love to have you be a part of that. Again, go to endtimes.com. And we're also live streaming the conference, and so you can sign up for the live streaming there at endtimes.com. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. God bless you. Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I'm so glad that you've joined me today. We have a very special program today talking about Israel. There are so many things happening related to the nation of Israel right now. It's unbelievable. And Brian Schrager, who is our Israel representative, our correspondent there, is going to be joining me here in just a minute. Before he joins me, let me tell you about a couple of resources that we have available. One is Where Are the Missing People? This is a book I wrote along with my daughter, and this is to help people who get left behind. When the rapture happens and we're taken as believers, unfortunately, there are going to be billions of people left behind during the worst 7 years of human history. Well, this book leads them to Jesus. First of all, the question that everybody's asking after the rapture is, where are the missing people? And the devil's going to give a false answer and a deceiving answer, but we're going to give people the truth, and that is the rapture happened and you've been left behind, but here's how you can have a relationship with Jesus, and here's what's about to happen in the world that you need to prepare for. So this is a book that you can leave on your coffee table, your nightstand, your car, your dorm room, your office, that you leave around, and it may not mean much to you. Now, people get really blessed by reading this book. Believers get really blessed by it. It will bless you to read it and just help you to know what's going to be happening in the future. But for an unbeliever, this is a lifeline for them. Once we're gone and it's laying there, they're going to pick this up, and they're not just going to read it. There's going to be a whole bunch of people reading it. And so if this is something you're interested in, just go to endtimes.com, go to store, and you can buy this there. But if you're buying multiple copies, a lot of people buy multiple copies. Some churches buy multiple copies of this for their church. Big discounts. The more you buy, the bigger the discount is. So if this is something that interests you, go to endtimes.com for that. We also, my wife and I, we celebrated our 51st wedding anniversary last Saturday. And so we wrote a book called I Will. This is 365-day devotionals for couples. And so as a couple, you can just pick this book up every day, take 4 or 5 minutes over the coffee table, dinner table, in bed, wherever you want to read it. And it just kind of leads you in just a little devotional to help your marriage. Every day begins with an affirmation, I will. And you just read that. A lot of people have been blessed by this. This just came out about a month ago. We also have a imitation leather gift edition. If this is something that you're interested in, you can buy it for yourself, you can buy it for a friend. But this is on xomarriage.com. If this is something you're interested in for yourself or to give away, it would sure be a blessing to you or to someone else that you know. So Brian Schrager worked as a journalist in Israel since 2014. He served for 2 years as the head of the news division for Bridges for Peace, and until 2021 as the bureau chief for USA Radio Network. He's joining me today to talk about current events in Israel. Brian, thank you so much for joining me. So much is happening in Israel today. It's amazing.
It is. And in fact, as we speak, Israel is celebrating its Independence Day, which is unique. In Israel, every year you have Memorial Day and Independence Day right next to each other. And so normally, in normal years, you see the country going from a posture of sorrow and sadness and honoring those who have died, either in battle or in terrorist attacks, to a shift in a single day to a celebration of life. This is a very unique cultural aspect about Israel, and it's very instructive. This year, however, is different. The move from yesterday's Memorial Day to today's Independence Day celebration isn't as much, it doesn't feel like a celebration to a lot of people. As we speak, I'm actually at a barbecue at a friend's home in Jerusalem. And, the general feeling here is that we don't really feel like doing this year, but we need to be with each other. And so normally too, like on Independence Day, there are picnics in the park. There are a lot of flags out. And one big thing that happens normally on Independence Day is you have the IAF flying formations over the city, over the country, right? Not this year. They're not doing that this year. They did fly formations yesterday when there was a ceremony happening in Jerusalem honoring those who have died and remembering them, which is not just in the distant past, but it's happened, those who have died just over the last 7 months.
You know, I'm sure there is also the sense that you don't let your guard down like on October 7th, you know, because all that. Well, I want to read a couple of scriptures here, Brian, but this is the 76th anniversary of Israel's independence. And the reason that's significant, Matthew 24, Jesus said, "Learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away." So Jesus says, and he's talking about the end times here, the generation that sees this, the end times unfold, will see all things fulfilled. Now, some people will argue with that, and they'll say, well, he's talking about the tribulation or whatever. Let me read one more text here, because I believe these two go together. In the Old Testament, Joel, "For behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem," that's 1948, "I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations, and they've divided up my land." Well, see, the first time, Israel's the only nation in the history of the world that's been dispossessed twice and come back. The first time was to Babylon, to one place, and they came back 70 years later from one place. The second time was in AD 70, when the Romans killed over 1 million Jews, destroyed the city and the temple, and took, many of them, back to Rome, where they ultimately got scattered around the world. And so God is saying here, in those days and at that same time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I'm going to enter into judgment. The valley of Jehoshaphat is the valley between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. It means Jehovah has judged. It's the valley of judgment. And so Jesus, according to Zechariah 14, Revelation 19, his feet will touch the Mount of Olives when he returns. And he then was going to destroy those who have come against Jerusalem to destroy it. But the thing that's interesting here, Brian, in those days and at that same time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I'm going to gather all the nations because of the way that they've treated my people, my heritage Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations, and they've divided up my land. You can check every box in there. It's all happened. So I don't know when Jesus is returning. We never set dates here on the show, but we're 76 years into this. And so Jesus talked about a generation. Psalm 90 says the days of a man's life are 70 years. I'm 70. I don't like that scripture. The days of a man's life are 7.
Close.
or if,
right behind you.
Or if by reason of strength they're 80 years. I'm believing in that one. But we're seeing, first of all, this is what the Bible says. Secondly, it just seems like we're at this moment in history where there's no going back. That's what it seems like. What do you think?
I agree 100%. At the barbecue that I'm at is a group of friends, and almost all of them are in journalism here in Israel. And so these are people who are doing news for a major TV station, and a lot of them are writing for the Jerusalem Post and for even international publications like the Wall Street Journal and things like that. So what I'm saying this because what I'm hearing here, I think, is very reflective of the mood. And what I'm hearing in this regard is the United States has melted down in terms of the rising anti-Semitism, what we're seeing erupting on the campuses. And one comment I just heard coming in from the outside to speak with you is that the conditions for anti-Semitism, the predilection, the tendency toward anti-Semitism was already in place before October 7. We began to see it erupt in the COVID thing because of the conspiracy theories that this was being engineered by some entity, and that was beginning to feed anti-Semitism or erupt. It was beginning to erupt because Israel supported and endorsed vaccines. And whether or not you agree with vaccines, what happened is the narrative generated by this Q individual or entity was being mainstreamed into, especially among evangelical Christians, supported conservative Christians, and a lot of them did not know what to do then with the reality that Israel was at the forefront of bringing vaccines in. All that to say, I don't want to get into that debate, but anti-Semitism began to erupt during the COVID thing, and now with October 7, what happened is suddenly it became acceptable for everybody in every in every cultural position to say Israel's a bad guy, and so it just poured fuel on the fire of anti-Semitism that had already been ignited.
It's unbelievable, Brian. I mean, it's supernatural, and I say this, and that is, anti-Semitism is not an ideology, because no one can really articulate why they hate Jews. It's a spirit. I believe it's demonic. It's just a demonic spirit. And it seems as though on October 7th, the gates of hell were just opened, and every anti-Semitic spirit, was let loose. Now, this is an article, and this is, again, unbelievable. This is last week. The United Nations votes to upgrade Palestinian statehood. And it says the United Nations General Assembly voted 143-9 to upgrade the Palestinian status as a non-member observer state, granting it all but voting rights with regard to all activities related to its plenum. And now the United States stood against it. We voted against it. Australia supported it. Canada, Great Britain, and Ukraine abstained. But the vote was 143-9. After Hamas attacks Israel, they promote their status in the United Nations. It's unbelievable. This September 20th and 21st, we invite you to join us at Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas for the Tipping Point Prophecy Conference. As we approach Rosh Hashanah, thousands of believers will come together to worship, understand world events through the lens of Bible prophecy, and anticipate the imminent return of Jesus Christ. Our conference kicks off with an evening of praise and worship featuring Dr. David Jeremiah, followed by a day packed with insights from renowned speakers, Max Lucado, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, Billy Crone, Ed Young, and Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. Don't miss this transformative gathering. Secure your place today at conference.endtimes.com. For those unable to attend in person, live streaming is available. Endtimes.com subscribers receive a 50% discount. Join us with your church group or friends for a weekend of profound spiritual impact and fellowship. Prepare for the Lord's return at the Tipping Point Prophecy Conference. Witness prophecy unfold.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. The reality, of course, is that the Palestinians cannot gain official status apart from the approval of the UN Security Council. So that's probably not going to happen as long as the U.S. continues to support Israel. But of course, as you and I both know, we're seeing cracks in that support already. It's been pretty good. It has been pretty good, but there are indications that it could crumble.
So I want to talk about Palestinian statehood for just a minute. And so now this is my thinking, and I want you to challenge me if this is not good thinking. It seems to me that today Israel is in an impossible situation because world opinion dramatically favors a two-state solution, including the United States. We're pressuring you guys. Okay, Netanyahu, and I don't think it's just Netanyahu, but the military or the government of Israel is saying, we will never do that. We will never make a deal with Palestinian Authority. We'll never make a deal with Hamas or Hezbollah. We'll never make a deal with our enemies again. So it seems to me, Brian, that this is kind of exactly the scenario of the end times and what the Bible says when the world hates Israel. The nations are against Israel, as we just saw in the United Nations vote. A few are standing with them, including the United States. In the United States, we're pressuring them to divide up the land. Remember Joel 3 that I just read there? He says, I'm going to come into judgment because you've divided up my land. Well, the United States is active. The Hamas has Gaza because the United States pressured Israel into giving that up in 2005.
Exactly.
Okay. So, but do you think there's any way that Israel would enter into a two-state solution?
No. You may hear political words that sound like, oh, we're willing to consider it, but living here, the clear sense is no. Israel cannot tolerate, it's impossible for Israel to tolerate a fully sovereign enemy state or state, period, but especially an enemy state on the borders of the so-called pre-67 boundary. And it can't defend itself. I mean, before 1967, you had the enemy, the Syrian enemy, shooting Israelis from the Golan Heights. I mean, they were like sitting ducks. Israel cannot give up the Golan Heights. It would be absolute foolishness. If you drive north in Israel and you go around toward Tel Aviv and go north, it's a very narrow corridor. It's only like 15, 16, maybe 20 miles wide from the Mediterranean to the boundary, the old boundary of the so-called West Bank. So nobody here really that I don't encounter anyone that really believes it's possible. There are ideologues in everywhere. I mean, there's always somebody who says, "Oh, it has to be done," and it's kind of a leftist thing. But Israelis are largely very pragmatic, and the sense here is that no, we've been there, done that. We tried. Yeah, we left Gaza completely, and they had an opportunity to build a Qatar, if you will.
They sure did.
They had a beautiful piece of land and property. It could have been an absolute gem in the world, and instead they chose to put all the money into these hundreds of miles of tunnels with the specific objective of obliterating the Jewish state. And a two-state solution is not going to be acceptable here. And in fact, I may have mentioned this to you before, Palestinians don't want a two-state solution.
No, they do not.
They want a one-state solution.
They do, yes.
But their one-state solution is bring in all of these so-called refugees that now are currently in Jordan and Syria, several million, bring them back in and vote all the Jews out, basically destroying the Jewish state and, creating a distinctly non-Jewish, anti-Jewish state. That's their objective. The two-state solution as it's being presented in the United Nations and in the Western press is not under serious consideration by either side here.
That's absolutely true. The Palestinians want a one-state solution, and Benjamin Netanyahu, after October 7th, he said the only difference between Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas is not what they want, it's just how they're going to do it. Hamas is just going to kill you, and the Palestinian Authority, or Fatah, they're going to do it more politically. But it's a death sentence. Now, let's go back to Gaza just a minute. Egypt and Qatar and other countries refuse, this is another news story, refuse Israel's offer to administrate Gaza. So Israel has gone to some of the Arab countries, beginning with Israel and Qatar, and said to them, once we clean up Gaza, we want you to administrate it. And all of the Arab countries are saying, we don't want to have anything to do with this.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Israel has said openly, we're not giving it back to Hamas. We're not giving it back. So this is another diplomatic point of impasse. I don't know how they're ever going to be able to get past this, because good and well, Netanyahu, they're not giving back the Gaza to anyone other than someone who has international trust. And the Palestinian Authority doesn't have that.
No, it doesn't. I'm laughing. I'm smiling as you say this because no other country in the Middle East wants anything to do with the Palestinians. They like the Palestinian cause, but they don't like the Palestinians. They are very much looked down upon and regarded as a nuisance. And nobody wants that. The Egyptians, by the way, are not Arabs. They're Egyptian. And so you have a very different cultural thing there. And they don't want their culture diluted with this or a conflict coming up with it. So, yeah, it's just not going to happen in terms of Hamas is not going to be allowed to stay. Although right now everyone's throwing up their hands. Are we really going to get rid of Hamas or not? The Palestinian Authority, no one here wants to see them in charge because they're not going to really be any better. But it's important to note, by the way, that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, he can't live a whole lot longer. And once he's out of the picture, the sentiment right now is, well, bring in Hamas. They're doing something. So Hamas would actually probably win elections today, which is one reason Abbas has not allowed elections to be held in 15 years, something like that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, they're not going to get rid of Hamas in this atmosphere because there's so much scrutiny on Israel right now. They've done everything they can to preserve life. And by the way, Brian, yesterday, the United Nations cut their estimates in half of the number of civilians that have been killed in Gaza. And
I saw that. Yes.
They were getting their information from Hamas. They were getting their information
Right.
from, and I've got this right here. It says the UN cites data from the Gaza Ministry of Health controlled by Hamas. And so Hamas is sitting here feeding them all this stuff. Well, they cut those estimates in half. So they're estimating that there's been 34,844 people killed in Gaza and 4,900 women, 7,700 children, which is way too many to be killed. But Hamas hides behind the women and children.
Of course.
Exactly. They build their military installations in daycare centers and schools and things like that, hospitals. And so Israel is in an unbelievable situation.
Hamas uses its population and celebrates. I mean, they accomplish everything they want to accomplish when their people are killed. And Israel makes telephone calls. It drops thousands of leaflets. It tells people, get out of the way. Sometimes Hamas won't let them. Sometimes Hamas blocks people from leaving because it wants them there as human shields. And of course, they inflate numbers. Someone here recently, and you can find this story, did an analysis of the death data, statistics coming out from Gaza, from Hamas, and noted that it was too regular to be realistic. In other words, there was too smooth of a curve. It wasn't credible. And yet the whole world has been buying these statistics until just recently. And I think the UN estimate dropped by something like 11,000 people. So one meme going around here the last few days there has been a miracle. The UN has raised 11,000, 12,000 men, women, and children from the dead.
Yeah, there you go. That's as close as they're going to get to a miracle. Thank you for joining us here today on the Tipping Point Show. Hope you enjoyed this. And this kind of brings us up to date now on Israel and what's going on over there right now. But we'll continue to keep you up to date on breaking news and on endtimes.com. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe to endtimes.com for $7 a month. If you are a subscriber, thank you. Thank you very much for all that you do for us and helping us to reach people and keep coming back to you. I'll see you next time right here on the Tipping Point Show. God bless you.